Hello, everybody. Welcome to BoF Live. Today, our guest is Fabien Baron. Very exciting conversation for me because I feel I'm a bit older than Fabien, but I feel I've grown up with him because he's shaped the visuals that really shaped our world in fashion. And it's a wonderful chance to talk to him, even though the circumstances are slightly bizarre. Where are you?
I am in the Hamptons. I'm so lucky to be in the Hamptons. It's because, like I have a garden, I have a big garden. So it's nice to be able to walk outside and not being like confined really all the time in the apartment. Just the idea to be able to walk outside anytime you want is a privilege that, I feel very, very privileged to be here, to be honest.
Now, people think of the Hamptons as being a sort of rich man's playground with huge big mansions and things, but there is a community there, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like, I have a small little house. It's a very, very old house. It's from 1783. So it was built first. It's an old farm. It's small. It's Checker style, and I renovated it. And it's, the floor is like moving around. Nothing straight. It's very nice. It's charming. It's not. It's far from being a mansion, and I'm glad I don't have a mansion actually.
And what are you doing now that you wouldn't be doing in your previous existence?
Well, I'm spending a lot of time cleaning out the house, actually, and cooking. Like, I'm sure everyone is, like, apart from trying to minimize the amount of time you go to the grocery stores, you spend your time cleaning out, like washing the floors, I even repainted the wall and power washed the facade, So I became like a super cleaning lady and an amazing, like a caretaker. I do everything. I have my box of tools and it's fine. It's great. I don't mind it. I like to stay busy. So
putting people back in touch with the way that, we remembered when we were kids. It felt like we were so much more self-sufficient.
Absolutely, yeah. I think things were, a little bit more simple, a little bit more basic. That's why, like the first thing I put down on my Instagram is back to basics. And I don't mind it because I grew up that way. So, we lived in a house in the suburbs of Paris when they had no electricity, no running hot water. And so no fridge, you had the stove, you had to go get the coal down in the basement and bring the coal up to the house and you have one heater in the house, and the bathroom was outside.
I remember an outside bathroom.
The bathroom was outside, and we didn't have a normal bathtub or anything like that. You had the kitchen sink, and that was it. And you were washed, as a kid, naked, in a basin, So that was it, and you had to warm up the water, and so that's the way I grew up, and I'm glad I did. And I think it kept me very, like normal and not too, so I'm not like, even though I live a very good life now and I've, and live a luxurious life and a privileged life compared to most people. I'm never afraid to go back to that because that's my roots and I feel kind of actually privileged. I lived that, I had the, I feel it was actually a good fortune to be able to grow up like that somehow.
I think you published in 2019. You published a book of your work, which was kind of a retrospective, but not. It wasn't chronological. It was a collection of everything you've ever done. Your professional work for people like Calvin Klein, Italian Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and then your personal work, your art. And what came through so strongly in that book, I thought, was your relationship with nature and the incredible respect that you have for the grandeur of nature, and what a challenge it is to try and capture that in a photographic image. And for anyone who isn't familiar with your Instagram at Fabien Baron, when you go there, you just see that same grandeur, but you manage to get it onto the screen of a mobile phone. You know, that you posted in the last couple of days, you posted the series of images of the beach, presumably the beach that's near your house.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what I love about those pictures is I think what we're being reminded about right now is how enormous and implacable and unconquerable nature really is. That we think we can control nature, but in the end, it will always vanquish us. And I think that's what your pictures do. The pictures of the beach, they're just so huge. And they're such a reminder of how tiny and insignificant people are. I mean, is that what you're trying to do with those pictures?
I think to me, like, it's a search for a serenity and a calmness. You know, I've been taking those pictures of the sea since 1983. So it's been quite a while. So I kind of know the subject matter quite well. So I know how to take a picture of the water. And I've learned it through mistake. I've learned it, you know, like through time, how to do it and how to do it well. But really for me, it's an internal journey, something very personal and very much attached to me and what I do. It's a counterbalance to all the commercial work that I'm doing outside. It's really my artwork, and I spend a lot of time doing it. Like, you know, the minute I have time off, that's what I do. I go and take images and, you know, do my, you know, photo collage and do all this work that I've amassed through the years. So there's a lot of it that is not known. And Instagram, the iPhone, was really a tool. It's almost the iPhone is the kind of like the sketch of the other image that I'm taking with my other camera. So I sketch it with the iPhone, put that on Instagram because it's instant and it's easy. And there's the other picture, which is done with another camera and a very different technique. There's a much larger camera, and that is my artwork. So, and strangely enough, what I posted last time was, for the first time on Instagram, I posted my non-iPhone pictures for the first time, because it was Earth Day and I felt like it was time to show, you know, certain of these images. So I posted a series of 5 or 6 pictures that are not the sketches, and that is on Instagram now. And I specifically, you know, quoted like it was not iPhone, because all the other pictures are iPhone. All my pictures on Instagram are done with the iPhone, and I want it to be like that way, because I feel like, you know, if you're on Instagram, you have to be instant and you have to do the thing like, you know, immediately. It has to be immediate. So I want to use my iPhone when I do Instagram. So these were the only times I did. It's strange that you noticed it.
But I think I don't know, maybe technicians would be aware of, would know that I watch you and Nick Knight taking pictures on your iPhones, and they are not the pictures that most people take on their iPhones. You do this, and suddenly, as if by magic, there is this astonishing picture. But what I'm curious about is whether you feel, because you take a lot of photos in nature, and it seems to me that your most personal photos are about nature. And
yes,
your most famous photos have the most famous images you're associated with are Kate Moss, or all the incredible work that you've done over the years with the supermodels, or with even something like the products, you know, like the Issey Miyake's bottle for his perfume. These things that are so iconic, but your most personal work is nature.
I think because the work is public. The work being public allows it to become iconic. My artwork is not, you know, something that I put out there yet. I'm in the process of doing that, and I want to do that now. So that's probably one of my next step, is to go out there and, like, you know, use my artwork and show my artwork in a way that, you know, I haven't done before. So maybe then we'll see, like maybe it's going to be iconic or not. We'll see.
But I'm wrestling my way to this point that do you feel your relationship with nature changing slightly in the light of this crisis that has been kind of brought about by our species' really compromised relationship with nature?
Well, it feels like it's a little bit like a little bit of a revenge, no, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we're messing up with the planet, that is for sure. And as a species, we actually endangering ourselves. You know, we're pushing at places where, you know, maybe nature is going to really get us back, because nature is going to win. There's no doubt about it. Like as a species, I think like we're more inclined to lose this game than nature is. Like, you know, they're saying, oh, it's, you know, the icebergs are melting, everything. No, it will be back, you know, really quickly. I mean, it's really interesting to see, you know, like the amount of pollution in 2 months, up the reduction of pollution in such a little time. Nature can make everything clean so quickly.
I mean, those pictures.
Nature is way stronger than we are, and I think like by pushing nature to that to its limit, to a certain limit, I think we endangering ourselves rather than endangering the planet. To be honest.
I mean, those pictures of peacocks walking through Madrid, which just unbelievable.
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah, no, it's crazy.
It's hard to believe that they're real, but
yeah,
I know the photos.
Ducks in Paris, in courtyards, in like, you know, sitting in the middle of the road. It's incredible.
Or dolphins in the Grand Canal, although apparently that was they were a fake. But that was a fake. You know, they might be coming. They might be coming. Yeah. I just wonder though that when I was looking at those photos that you took on the beach, and there was sort of like one moment over the course of a day with different lights, or over the course of a few days. The same location but different lighting, and you see that the incredible power and beauty of nature. And you know, I went back and looked at your book, because those pictures of they're just, you just stare at them for hours. You can drown in them. And I wondered whether you felt your attitude to what you were doing has changed by this thing, how your attitude to what you do has changed with
the gymnastic of it, of taking the picture, is exactly the same. I wake up really, really early. I take my camera, even though like my back hurts, and like, you know, I carry the camera, it's a heavy camera, and I take it to the beach every morning. So the gymnastic of doing the work is the same. But the actually, you know what, like I was actually like, the first time I took a picture, you know, was in the situation, I felt actually really good to be there on the beach and be able to take one of these pictures, because it was very reassuring. It was very calming, and it was very humbling to be there. And it's a place that I know very, very well. And it's like a place of safety in a way. So I felt really good. I felt connected to what I was doing and what I was looking at. And I think that's part of the process of taking those images.
And do you see it as art, or do you see it as a record?
No, I see it as art, yes. Because it's an interpretation of what I'm looking at. Like, you know, like not the picture on the iPhone, but the finished picture that I'm taking, I think they've extremely long exposures, like sometimes like, you know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So it is whatever happened during that time that is recorded in a way, and it does its own thing. So I see it more as an art than you know, a recording. Even though I'm like, even though I am recording it, like, you know, and then there's the gymnastic of going back every day and doing that picture over and over. I've done, I don't know how many pictures I have of the sea. I don't know, like thousands. I've done a book on it like 10 years ago. I have another book that is in the work. about it again. And, you know, like, and also like now I want to show the work in the gallery. I want to, you know, present it in a way that is different than, you know, like collecting, you know, the work for myself.
You know, I think about, like, say a photographer like Richard Misrach, who took thousands of photos of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
or Claude Monet painting the Houses of Parliament in London, where you take one subject and you record that subject obsessively over and over and over again, until it becomes like a sort of a dialogue with the subject in a way, but also a real meditation on what creativity is. And do you, I think everybody who's making things now, and we're in this moment, we don't really know what's going to happen. We're not fully aware of how the world's going to change. Whether you imagine how people will look at this work when you're doing it, what this work will mean in, I don't know, 20, 50, 100 years.
I think like when I look at it myself, even now, and I see the body of work, it is definitely a study, and it is definitely looking at this one subject matter in a very specific way, and try to understand its nuance and try to understand how it functions. I like the fact that it was very minimal subject, that there's half of the picture is water, half of the picture is sky. And these two elements, you know, how they contact together, how they interact together, and how, like, you know, the wind is playing, you know, like the wind is playing, you know, with the clouds, like, all, you know, like it changes all the time. And that's why, you know, I put in the caption, you know, always the same, because it's always the same picture, but it's never the same. And, you know, like, and when you mentioned, for example, I posted like different times, they were like just 5 minutes apart. And the change, like, you don't even perceive it unless you really put your head to it and you really start looking, and it forces you to really think about what you're looking at. And it keeps you in focus and keeps you like very aware of your environment. And it's like being in the Zen moment in a way. This part of it is that, I would say.
Well, there's something about the horizon that's always been particularly mesmerizing for human beings. Was Gustave Le Gray one of the earliest photographers, and he took those photos of the sea and the sky? Was his name Gustave Le Gray? A very early French photographer?
I don't know.
He used to put two photos together. He used to put his photo of the sea and his photo of the sky together.
Oh, interesting.
And, I mean, one of the earliest photographic collages, I guess. I think his name was Gustave Le Gray. And I look at those horizon shots, like Hiroshi Sugimoto doing the same long exposures, and this mesmerizing. Horizons, I guess, are actually quite optimistic things, because you want to go beyond them to find what's next.
It's also a perfect balance.
Yeah.
Between the ground and the sky.
But mystery too. Mystery. Yeah. Something quite spiritual. Do you feel there's something spiritual in what you do?
Absolutely. And the going back to it like a religion is pretty much, you know, an aspect of it.
You feel that?
I do it religiously. There's a methodology in the way I do it.
Do you feel that more strongly as you get older?
Well, it's funny because it's something I'm doing since 1983, and I'm taking that pictures, and I continue to take that picture. And it's the repetition of it makes it like, you know, going to, it's like maybe it is very religious. Maybe it is very like, you know, trying to be like attached to something that is bigger than you and that you cannot control, and that you try to control every day and it doesn't work, and you get results from it, and then you wish it would be like this, and when is it going to look like this, or you expecting I'm missing that, and you try to find it, and you search it every day, and that's what I'm doing. I wake up, it's dark, I don't know what's going to be. I kind of understand a little bit more because, there's stars, there's no stars. Can you see the moon? And I go to the beach, and then I start there in the dark, and I stay until like 2 hours. 2 hours there, and I take these very long exposures. And then I go home, and I start my day.
And then you have a fabulous breakfast. It's a really an incredible. I could see suddenly I see this now, and maybe I saw it before, but I always saw in your work. I saw chaos and control. I saw that because you're quite obsessive in the way you work and the way you are. So precise, and you're actually applying this incredible precision to quite chaotic things. So we have the spirit of you on the beach, and then we have the flesh of a naked Kate Moss sprawled across a couch, or a naked Eva Mendes in a Calvin Klein ad. We have the incredible carnality of your work in fashion. So actually, you're heading into sort of quite philosophical country here, the spirit and the flesh. It's very French.
Oh, yes, it is. That is funny.
But it's the monumentalism of the work in nature. It's so interesting to look back on. And I'm trying to be allergic to the word back, because I think right now we have an opportunity to go forward, but often it's hard to not go back, because you want to contextualize things. But you're probably one of my favorite ad campaigns ever was CK1 with that gang of Generation X. What would they have been at that point?
Yeah, I think they were.
Generation X.
Yeah.
Kind of scruffy, hanging out like Kate.
Hanging out like grungy kids.
Stella Tennant, Mike Campbell, all those incredible models around in the early 90s. And that now, because you were referencing Andy Warhol's photo, Richard Avedon's photo of the people at the factory.
That's correct.
Warhol and his superstars, Joe D'Alessandro, Candy Darling, and everybody. And then you recreated that with this cast of characters. And that image is as iconic as the one that you were referencing. When you look at that, especially when you're working on that book, how did you process all that work that you'd done, which was a commercial assignment, which took on a whole other life? And when you look at it now, because you remember you were talking about closing a door with that book, and you wanted to open a door to a brave new world. Well, the brave new world is this virus right now. But what do you think now, even in from the time that the book came out to now, when you had everybody reacting to stuff you'd done, how do you feel about it all now?
Well, I think even more today, like you said, I think it's really closing a door now. I think this is really the past, and the future is going to be totally different. And with the virus going on, and it's going to bring a lot of changes. But I'm really optimistic with the changes. I see a lot of I think the economy is going to be difficult for the economy, of course. It's going to be difficult for the fashion industry, of course. But out of this, I think you're gonna have, there's something very optimistic about change, and to be forced to change, allows one to really put you ahead to the issues that we all facing, and to really think about it, and to really study it, and to move forward in a way to be more with awareness and a certain put the right thoughts into it, and not being so confused about all the mistakes that we've made, and being able to look at it and seeing that we've done wrong things, and maybe moving forward we can fix that. So I also think it's a moment where creativity is going to be very important. I think if you're creative, I think it's going to be you saving grace, I would imagine that is going to be a moment when people are going to be highly creative, where possibilities and opportunities going to arise. I feel that, we're at the moment when there's doubt like this, there's not really an answer. There's not a package that is already formed that you need to fit within. And there's options and opportunities to take more risk and to be more creative. So that, I think, where it's going to go.
How do you think that will manifest itself, though?
I think
what will creativity look like?
Well, I think it will look like, like new pictures, new way of taking pictures, new way of doing everything, new way of doing magazines, if magazines continue to exist, new way of, of maybe like dressing people, maybe new way of selling clothes, a new way of doing everything. But that's going to come through creativity. That's going to come up with being very creative in the way you handle things and not go back to the old format automatically. And things that old formats been challenged, we need to find new ideas and new ways of processing what we need to do, what we need to produce, what we need to put out there. How the product is going to change.
Yeah, you in the past have said that you're not interested in the past, that actually living in your time is the most important thing for you. So this time is going to be difficult. That there'll be horrendous unemployment. There'll be, in fact, just taking the fashion industry alone, the way that we did things was clearly unsustainable. Everybody knew that. But now that we've actually been brought to this point where it is impossible to sustain, I'm very curious about what you, as an image maker, what kind of images that you as an image maker would imagine making? Will you want to provoke people? Will you want to reassure people? Will you want to inspire people?
Inspire people with new ideas and new ways of looking at things is always one, challenging, but also is always refreshing. You need like freshness. You need like things that feels like you need a lot of positiveness, I think. I don't think you need provocation for the sake of provocation. That was something like that was good in the 90s, I think. But I think provoking today is not maybe the right thing to do. I don't feel comfortable with that. I feel like, I feel like to be a little bit more humble with the visuals, to be a little bit more finding closeness, finding a warmth and a positiveness is probably where I might want to go myself.
So humanity.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more like those pictures, those sea pictures.
Well, humility for sure, because you are humble in the face of nature in those pictures. Yes. You really are. But you've been such a master of the power of shock. I'd love to see the faces of people in 1,000 years when they look at Madonna's sex book, what they will make. When you look at illuminated manuscripts in the Middle Ages, and like in another 1,000, you're looking at Madonna's sex book. Where's the power of, because the power of shock has been very, very good to you. Where is it now? It's important in a way to keep people on their toes, but what will be shocking after this whole crisis?
Maybe back to certain simplicity. Maybe back to things that are more basics and rediscovering basics and presenting them in a new way. Because that's where we all doing every day right now. We're going back to basics, aren't we? So maybe you have to start from a new scratch, a new basic, a new simplicity, a new way of looking at things in a more humble way, in a more for what they are, which is and there's a truth about that, and there's a shock about that. I think if it's very well done, I think there's the truth of looking at something for what it is, and there's a shock about that. I think if it's very well done, I think there's the truth of looking at something for what it is, and there's a shock about that. I think if it's very well done, I think there's the truth of looking at something for what it is, It's not, you know, like we're in the fashion industry, take things for what they are and change them and decorate them and move them into, and make stories around them. Going back to that basic and look at it for what it is, maybe is a good start, a good starting point, and rediscovering a certain creativity that might lead you to new path. You know, it's something that you need to do as, you know, as each person needs to maybe go back there, like, you know, search for a purity in the creativity.
So that's actually shocking you out of the way you did things, but it's not actually shock as we understand, like shock giving offense or something, you know, that won't exist.
Well, maybe there will be a new way to do that.
Ooh.
You know, it's going to be an evolution. It's going to be an evolution of it. You go back to the basic and you build it up to a new way of maybe be shocking or be like whatever, or sexy, or sexiness going to come back, but in a different way, in a new way. I mean, like the things are going in circles. They've always been going in circles, right? So I would think like, but it's a reinterpretation. Like you're going to have to reinterpret all the, you cannot go back to old formats. You know, you always have to go forward. You know, you build up from your past and you learn from it and you move forward with it, you know, and you sort of like to kind of like, you know, like want to describe the evolution of what was and what can be and what the wish of each person wanted to be. And, you know, it's packaging, you know, the past into a future.
It's interesting because shock was so often attached to decadence, and we were all in love with decadence. I mean, I use that word so often when I'm writing about fashion shows, and it was never in a particularly, you know, pejorative way. I was always like decadence, you know, it seemed kind of juicy and sort of 70s-ish or something, you know, disco and so on and so forth. It feels in a way that is done. It feels that will seem not very useful going forward. Like that idea of sort of, you know, jaded, druggy, you know, disco-fied, decadent people isn't, that will feel like something that's way back there.
Probably not. No, I agree.
And I'm in love with the idea of, you know, goats in the backyard and all that sort of stuff, you know, going back to village life. But I just, seeing you have really dictated the visual tone.
But also there's another point to be made here. It's also like the tools of which the way we communicate are changing, and they're changing constantly. I mean, look at the way we have to communicate now with Zoom. So therefore, I think the way we communicate is going to change because the tools are changing and they're opening new doors and they allow us to do different things and to view things from different angles. At the end, the subject matters, they're still the same. It's really the approach that you have at it and the tools that you're using to kind of trying to discover new angles on these subject matters. So the evolution of technology, the evolution of the tools with which we work, and the place and the you know, the way, you know, we have to go through right now is automatically going to change the way we're going to want to communicate. The messaging is going to change, and the messaging, like the concept, the messaging to me becomes really the most important thing. So I think we have a duty to make something work, and therefore maybe the voice in which you say things it's going to be probably be a little bit more serious and authentic now than it was, you know.
What does that look like?
It can look so many different ways, you know. I think storytelling is going to have to be more important. Superficiality is going to have to be less important, and truthful things going to have to be move forward. So I think like also like visually, when, you know, like how things could look visually, I think you have to start with your concept. Like what is the concept of which you want to communicate and how you want to communicate, and put words to that, and put a structure to that, and put tools to that, and then the visual will come, I think, automatically.
Wow. I'm still trying to imagine that. I think it's interesting, when your book came out, we were talking about the door you closed was on all that work that you'd done for decades. And the door you wanted to open, you were talking about movies. And it's really interesting now, we're on Zoom, which is moving. In the last 2 months, everybody's
the moving image is going to,
everybody's talking in moving images.
The moving image is definitely going to take a huge part in that. You see it everywhere. Even the movie industry, the motion industry is moving for. I mean, with Netflix, you know, Hulu, like all this, you know, like all this change, like, you know, like producing a movie today, like, you know, like there's so much content that needs to be put out there. So
what kind of,
you know, maybe the photography is, what the storytelling will be important. That I'm for sure about. I think like people want to be told love stories, you know, like sad stories, happy stories. I don't think it matters what type of story. I think you have to find your own story. Like, you know, I mean, it depends in what context you want to talk about stories. In the context of like what we do in fashion, or in just the context of life in general.
Human stories, you're saying, though, that
I think it has to be human stories. Yes. I think the people voicing themselves and telling their stories, I think is going to be something important, because we all live through something important that is affected every one of us, and we have all of us have an angle on it, and all of us have, you know, things that in common about it, and we have all very specific angles about it, and these stories will be heard, I would imagine. And they will feed the new creativity, and we will have to create with that in context.
And do you have faith that there will be a sort of global consciousness about this?
I think there is already, no?
Oh, I hope so.
I think so. I think, like, you know, like
there's a man telling,
the world was going towards globalization. It was, you know, like, and of course there is still,
which wasn't a good thing, though.
It was not a good thing, you think?
Well, globalization was a sort of business idea for very, very rich people. So, you know, I think the whole left behind notion, I think, became very, very, became a huge issue when populist leaders could capitalize on the sort of discontent of people who've been left behind by globalization. But I'm wondering now, I mean globalization as in a global, not globalization, but a global consciousness of this thing we have all faced around the world.
Well, it's incredible, the idea that, you know, like wherever you turn on this planet today, like everyone's wearing a mask, and that's quite incredible. You know, when we talked before, and I think there's a global awareness that had to happen with that. You know, like that we feel want very small and to very, you know, part of the world. You have to feel part of the world.
Yes, part of nature.
And part of nature.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing, to feel that we are not bigger or better than anything else on the face of the planet. We're actually, you know, we're actually part of the whole. And I think for too many millennia, human beings have, you know, put themselves above that. They were given, you know, dominion over nature, and dominion doesn't mean domination. Dominion means guardianship.
Well, what set us apart is, you know, the ego. The ego is killing human.
And the id. When we talked the id, who says to inject disinfectant. When we talked when the book came out, you said you think about death all the time, which seems also to be another quite French thing. Are you still thinking about death all the time when actually it is a much more dynamic notion?
Definitely.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Really? Why?
I don't know. I guess it's, why not? I mean, to be honest.
No, I mean, when you're actually looking at it, when you're actually looking at the kind of possibility that it's out there waiting for us all right now, that it's not, this isn't a distant, that this virus, whatever it is, isn't some distant kind of confection. It's actually right here all around us with people we know. I thought that with your 4 children, you would be thinking, no, I want to live.
Oh, but I do want to live, duh. Of course. But you think about it as something that is part of you. I mean, like, you have to accept it. And like, it's something hard to accept that one day you're not going to be around. And that's the ego, is the fight with the ego, isn't it?
Who are you in the house with? Who are you in the house with?
I'm with Ludivine,
Yeah.
and Louise.
Just one of your children?
Yeah, well, we had Eva with us, and she went back to the city, actually. She wanted to be back to the city, so she went back.
And having 4 children,
it was great. It's fabulous.
Does it make you feel patriarchal in a time of crisis like this? Do you feel?
No, not really. I think I'm part of a big family, which I have a big family, and I feel really close to all my children, and it's there's something, we talk all the time on the phone, we not Zooming, but we talk on the phone, we talk, FaceTime, we FaceTime a lot. I have 2 children in LA right now, like Matthew, he's 31, and Ariel, who's 28, and Eva, who's 21, who's going to turn 21, and she's in New York. So, and Louise, who's 8. So we talk all the time. I mean, it's been quite like an interesting moment for family time. I think it's been nice to focus on that, and to be, in the house, and to be, taking care of the family, cooking and doing the normal things of life, of everyday life, that we all kind of forgotten that we hired people to do things for you. You're so busy at work that you have a cleaning lady, you have this, you have that, you have someone that comes and do the garden and cut the grass, and like you have people working for you, and you part of that circle of work. But now, I mean, it's different. So, and I don't mind to be back to a more simple life. And it's been nice on the human level to be really close to your kids in this way. So I will cherish this moment as well. There's a lot of good in this moment.
And that obviously affects the way you work too.
Absolutely. And the way you think, and the way you want to think, how you want to communicate in the future.
I was just thinking, one of your last Instagram posts was your campaign for Xenia. What makes a man?
Yeah, what makes a man, yes.
And that was a campaign that has a celebrity in a very kind of global context, like probably a huge budget, lots of travel, a big crew making it, I would imagine. And that now, it's it's impossible to imagine in a time of the distancing that's we've been cancelled on. And the whole idea of travel, I think, I was talking to my cousin who lives at the very, very top of New Zealand, and travel isn't going to be that easy from now on. I think everybody is much more aware of borders. Borders are closed. There will be more.
That is going to be only for a while.
I'm not so sure. I think in people's heads, the seed's planted now. And Australia and New Zealand have closed their borders, so you can't get in. Even if it goes on for a year or a little while, the whole idea of travel will change. It will maybe even go back to what it used to be. Maybe we'll be traveling between places on ships. in a couple of decades. And the
You would
whole
be
notion
traveling even more.
and the travel will be the adventure it used to be, that you didn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to go to Tokyo today, and you go to Tokyo. Now you're going to have to plan it and think about it. And it's going to be so special when you do these things. This is my fantasy anyway, that everything will acquire its appropriate weight, that the world isn't shrinking anymore. The world will expand. It's going to take time and effort to do things in the way that it hasn't. We've been so spoiled, especially.
That's true. That's very true.
Let's go to Kyoto for a fashion show tonight,
I always thought that was ridiculous.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
we needed a reminder of how ridiculous it was, didn't we?
I mean, like, being an editor, like, I must have been like hell that you have to go to all these places, from this city to that city just to see a show. It's kind of like, doesn't make any sense. After a while, it doesn't make any sense.
No, well, it didn't. And it didn't even make sense while everybody was doing it. It wasn't like people said, people did say this is ridiculous, but they kept on doing it. And now we've been put in a position.
It's so costly. And probably it's unnecessary. There's other ways you can communicate. That's what I'm saying. There's other ways you can communicate those ideas. There's other ways.
But
the money that is spent on something like that, on a venue like that, is there a way to communicate with the people that you need to communicate to, with that budget?
Yeah.
It's not a small budget, and you can do a lot.
Okay, what do you imagine? How do you imagine?
You could do a film. You could do a film, for example.
A film. Mm-hmm.
It's the same budget.
But film, it's interesting when you watch a virtual fashion show, like Armani did the virtual fashion show at the end of Milan, the digital fashion show.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching that and I was thinking, well, it was very obviously, it was a full record of the show. They staged the show, filmed the show. And I was thinking that when you're sitting in a fashion show, all the variables that you can't even account for, like you see the faces of the people over there, you see whatever's happening here, like you want to look at that shoe or that button or something, I don't know, whatever, you fixate on something going past, there's a noise in the photographer's pit, you look over and you just realize how it's a human experience, that you're sitting in a crowded place with a whole bunch of other people looking at the same thing and everybody's having a different reaction.
Okay, that's a very small audience though.
But it's the same for an opera. It's the same for a concert. It's the same for a movie. When you're sitting in a movie, do you think people are going to end up missing? People going to go back to crowded movie theaters? You can't have social distancing in a movie theater. I mean, 3 seats away, or in a restaurant, tables are all going to be 8 feet apart. And, the physical experience of life that we lived, the life that we lived 2 months ago, the changes and even I don't actually imagine it, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't, do we? We don't know what this thing is really still. How do you imagine fashion? Is it even a question of duplicating those experiences or reconceptualizing them so that they are as immediate and visceral and physical and seductive as they were? How do you imagine that? Can you visualize that?
Well, I think number one, the audience in a fashion show is very divided, right? There's really the people that the professionals that need to be there, and there's a lot of people that really you don't understand who they are, what they do. Right. So the audience, like I remember fashion shows when the audience were much smaller, right? And the venues were not as extravagant. And that was fine, wasn't it? We were getting what we needed to get from the shows.
And there were no photographers, and it was just.
But there were some photographers, but there were not billions of photographers.
What are you talking about? The 80s or 90s?
Yeah, like the 80s, then even the 90s. Like the shows were not as costly, the productions were not as insane.
No sets.
The sets were not like
none,
right?
And they went on for an hour and a half.
It was not like a theater like it has become today. right?
Mm.
So when you look at even the show today, like how many people see that? So like 1,000 people, 500, something like that. And the number of people watching the show live, that's a huge amount of people watching the show live. That's a huge amount of people looking at YouTube and following the show and getting aware of what fashion is doing. When before, the same people, the same crowd was not watching because they didn't have the tools to watch. They didn't know. They were waiting for magazines to learn what fashion had to say. But now you have all these tools. You have like live, like, so you have millions of people. I don't know, like there was a quote of, I don't know, like 10 million people were watching at the same time, like live or like live shows. So 10 million people watching on YouTube and 500 in the room. The balance, maybe the audience there could be a live audience that would be smaller, and maybe the backgrounds are more simple. And then there's like some kind of technology that allows to view it on YouTube in a different way, in a different experience. The CGI, possibilities, it could be interesting that the guests at the show, they would use their phone because, like people want influencers at the show because of the multiplication of the views through their own channels, right? So
that's going to change.
That's going to change as well.
Yeah,
a lot of things are going to change.
Yeah.
But, like probably you could get, like a small intimate show, which are very efficient for the professional people. And actually, like, we talked about that together, like how, like many times, like how much you enjoy when it is a small show and you see the people that needs to be at the show there. And it's a small crowd and it feels like very intimate and you feel part of something special. And then maybe there's a wider audience can watch it, on YouTube, and maybe that's done in a much better way than it was done.
So
it's like saying, like, we'd love to be in the stadium, like when there's the World Cup at the final, we'd love to be in the stadium. It's amazing, but it's not like nobody's watching on TV, right? Come to this.
Always, yeah.
Come to this.
But then my point is always I love fashion shows, and the physicality of fashion shows is obviously why I love them. I love the whole performance, the whole.
Of course, I do too.
The whole intimacy that even when it's big, it's kind of intimate.
Of course.
And I just don't really. I'm really kind of trying to work out how we move forward without that option. And my thinking is too kind of clogged with ye olde worldy thought to visualize a sort of technological alternative. That's why I'm kind of wondering how you see it all. I've seen some incredible VR things, and then we talk about storytelling, and you have VR, you have storytelling in VR, really amazing, strong things where you could create a narrative around clothing, but
I think that's a possibility. I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think that could be something quite amazing. You could go into like a lot of detail, sing the clothes really well, like a live show.
But you wanted to move it. You wanted to go into movies, and move on into this sort of fulfill your ambitions there. Do you see that everything that's happening now kind of drawing you back to fashion in a way to use this challenge to reconceptualize the way people look at fashion? You've always been a sort of taste leader in that way. Do you see yourself coming back to fashion?
Well, I think it's once in fashion, it's hard to totally let go of it. I mean, I don't think I want to let go of it. No, I want to add to my to my knowledge by working with other mediums. But no, I think it's an interesting time. It's a very challenging, interesting time. I see it full of opportunities. I see it like there's many options. It's the time where people are really thinking about new ideas, and you know, in the times of desperation like this, like I think like people like are willing to take certain risk and try new things, and you know, like, and people are more, even the general public is more open to new ideas as well, and to receive new way of being communicated at.
Well, it's,
So
history teaches us that after a catastrophe, there's usually an enormous explosion of human creativity. So
there we go.
human activity, creative activity. So fingers crossed. We should talk again in a year.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, and also like, you know, I feel like, you know, okay, you know, like the world went through World War II, right? How bad was that?
And World War One.
And World War One, and how bad the world was when it was done. And look where, you know, how quickly it bounced back, and now, you know, so we have to stay optimistic.
And on that note, I feel that the goblins, the Hamptons, the digital goblins in the Hamptons are trying to stop you talking because you're kind of freezing up. But Fabien, thank you so much. It was wonderful to talk to you today. And
the same with you, Tim. I always love to talk to you.
And I don't know when we'll see each other again, but we should do this more often.
That's true. That's true. It's fun.
Thank you
nice zooming with you, Tim.
Bye.